To all of our family and friends, welcome back to our studies. For all those that are in the fellowship with us, we have a powerful, that's the word we powerful parsha today. It's very, very prophetic parsha, and that is calling us to realign with God's wisdom and understanding. And this parsha, the 10th parsha Miketz, the righteous leader, one of the things that you talk about here, and this is really the story of Yosef, if we want to, call it that. But you talked about in our parsha today, we need a Hebrew, not a hero, and that's kind of how I want to talk about this. That's how I want to share space today in our Torah talks. When I looked over the parsha studies as far as the commentary goes, one of the things that you talked about was what's bursting forth on the pages of Torah during this parsha cycle. And there was about 5 things you brought forth, and I want to emphasize one of them. One was paradigm shift. The second was it was going to be an outline of the end of days, end of the age, the prototype for messianic redemption, and then the world as we know it is about to change, and it will be changed forever. And then there is a great shaking. There is a great shaking in the forecast. When we talk about the shaking that's taking place, and we can already begin to feel a little bit of the trembling even now because of everything that's going on this stage, on the world stage. This, for us as believers, as we study the parsha, it's requiring and is necessitating a paradigm shift, right? And that's where I want to start this parsha, or this conversation in Torah Talks, because we're still talking about the service model. We're still, developing that model and talking about it more, and which this model is a counterbalance, we said, to the Ra, Shakad, and Hamas. And if we're talking about being that service model, it is going to require a paradigm shift on our part. But in our parsha today, we're talking about activating that paradigm shift. So I want you to talk a little bit about the paradigm shift and what's necessitating the activation of this paradigm shift. I'm sorry, hold on a second. I'm Tony. That's Bill. I call him Papa B.
Amen.
All right.
And this is Torah Talk.
This is Torah
with
Talk.
Tony and Bill. I'll tell you part of Tony's story. Yeah. First of all, we're talking obviously about the 10th parsha of the Torah, which is parsha Miketz. Mm-hmm. And this is the address of that is found at Genesis 41:1 through 44:17. I've got there for a second. And we're using this phrase paradigm shift. Paradigm is basically the way you look at the world, the way you see the world, the worldview that you have, the priorities that you put into that worldview, what you see and pay most attention to, and what you perceive as really going on in the world. That's your paradigm. A shift, obviously, is whenever it begins to make some adjustments. You have to make an adjustment to the way you look at the world. Make an adjustment to the priorities alignment that you've got, assignments that you've got. Begin to focus on different things as being the most important, as opposed to what you did think was most important, or what you let yourself become comfortable with, and begin to think a little outside the box to see things from okay, this is where we are. That's worse than what I thought, or different from what I thought. We really need to make some adjustments in our worldview and our approach to the world and our approach to life in general in order to be successful and navigate this season well, and to have the impact upon the world that the covenant people of the Creator of the universe are called to have upon the world. So in general, the idea of a paradigm shift is that we have an awakening, as it were, an increase in vision. Something happens in the world or in our private lives or in a combination of the two that makes us say, wait a minute, our way of thinking is not sufficient to meet this challenge, to meet the situation that presently is on the board. And usually there's something that activates that paradigm shift. And the Parsha gives us the example of that, and I call them the Pharaoh's dream scenario. what activates a paradigm shift is a realization that something scary is happening. And for Pharaoh and Pharaoh's dreams, the idea was he saw the 7 fat cows come out of the Nile in his dream, and then he followed were 7 skinny, emaciated, sickly-looking cows, and then they turned cannibal and they ate up the 7 fat cows. The dream, he woke up, he with the start, he went back to sleep. He woke up, he went to sleep and to dream again. This time it was stalks of grain with the heads of grain. Out of the Nile River came these beautiful stalks of grain, 7 of them. And then suddenly he noticed they were being followed from the Nile River by 7 very ugly, emaciated, sickly-looking heads of grain or stalks of grain. And they also turned cannibal, and they ate up the 7 fat grains of corn or heads of corn. Of grain. When he woke up and he was troubled, he needed a paradigm shift. Something had awakened in him, and so we, throughout the course of life and the world, we have seasons of paradigm shifting Pharaoh's dreams. Sure. And the world begins to talk about how terrible things are, and how horrible it's going to be, and what the oh my, the sky is falling. You know, whether it be now, you might think about climate change, or you think about this person becoming president, or this person becoming prime minister of this country, and how horrible the world would be if that happened, if this election went this way. Or you think about the war in the Middle East spreading and incorporating Russia and China and the other nations, and all of us having to go to war, another World War III scenario. We think about nuclear holocaust. We think about aliens invading from outer space. Somebody has a Pharaoh's dream, and they begin to talk about that Pharaoh's dream. That Pharaoh's dream has its own nature of dark energy to it. It brings fear. It brings worry. It brings blame. It brings all sorts of jealousy and envy and feeling of, why do I have to live in such a time as this? And could we bring children to such a time as this? And all the silly things that human minds work on. But what you're getting is this is a catalyst for a paradigm shift. Yes. Because what's really being said is the world is not what we thought it was. It's not our own little playground. Instead, we need to adjust our worldview and our approach to life to meet the challenges of what we now see as a potential problem in the world.
Oh, wow. So when I think of paradigm shift, I think of patterns, right? And here's a pattern that has set in place. According to this, the covenant community has stopped moving forward, right? Meaning that they had stopped moving forward in and with the grand plan, and is absorbing toxic levels of pressure from without, absorbing toxic levels of pressure. So much so that we're not moving, right? We're not moving like he's called us to move.
And this happens from time to time. As a matter of fact, it's sort of a fall into a rut scenario of the covenant people, or any group of people, and nations do this, but covenant people do this. And so what happens is, after a while, you get settled into a certain routine. You think things are under control, and you think, therefore, that you can sort of expand your viewpoint into theological arguments, or political arguments, or ideological arguments. You think this is what's important, and you get kind of comfortable and arrogant, and you get emotionally involved in some of these arguments, and you quit doing anything. Yeah. You quit having any positive impact in the world. And so this is what happens in the covenant family in particular. We're supposed to be the counterbalance, yes, the strategic counterbalance that shows there's a more excellent way in the world. And when we settle in, other nations and peoples and Gentiles and other people settle into routines, and it has its own problems for their culture. But for the entire, as the people of the covenant go, so goes the world. So we have to maintain focus, forward focus, and redemption focus, and grand plan of redemption and restoration focus, or we'll get like the rest of the world. We'll just get comfortable and start arguing over stuff that won't change anything. Right. That will be stuff that maybe somebody wants a hero to arise. But what they really need is for the ultimate Hebrew to arise, not a hero.
What are some of the telltale signs of a paradigm shift. So we know that the paradigm shift is necessary. We know that Abba is strategically provoking that paradigm shift. But what are some of the telltale signs of a paradigm shift?
You will see things beginning to get a little uncomfortable out there from the standpoint of what we thought was normal, what we thought was reasonable. Paradigm shifts usually begin with some calamity or catastrophe. So a pestilence, a sickness, a pandemic changes the status quo, makes everybody rethink everything about how they do everything. Then you see other catalysts for a paradigm shift include a great wealth redistribution. And maybe a feeling of alienation from conventions and institutions. I feel like I can't trust the institutions anymore. I mean, and like in today, can we trust the educational institutions? Can we trust Harvard? Can we trust Yale? Can we trust the medical community? Can we trust the scientific community? Can we trust the government? Can we trust anybody? And so since there's a shift in redistribution of trust among the people because we've been either lied to or feel like we've been lied to or feel like we've been basically abused or used. And then there's a sense of the wealth. We see wealth doesn't look like it's where it should be. And our minds begin to get into issues of this isn't fair, this isn't right, these people are getting all this money and they're using it, this many people have all the assets and the technology and these other people don't have. And so we begin to be awakened to the idea that there are inequities in the world. There have always been inequities in the world. There is no utopia we're living in here. The Messianic reign will be as close to that as we ever get. But short of that, we couldn't expect a lot of people to be making a lot of utopian ideas and redistributions as well. But we see things begin to change. We see mass migrations of people. Paradigm shifts go along with, suddenly, people talk a lot about the border in the United States, and not just the United States, Europe in particular has border issues. We have so many all over the world. I mean, I remember being in South Africa for years and seeing this huge influx of people because there was some economy in South Africa that wasn't in the middle of the African continent. So millions of people would come into South Africa, and then they had no place to go and be incorporated into society. It was a real mess. But anytime you see a mass migration of people, you can say, well, it's not right, and the politics aren't right, and we should change the politics, we should change the politicians. But the reality is something's causing a mass migration.
Right.
Something's causing people to move. We can always argue over what the law should be, but the question is, can we get to the root of the problem? Can we get to the root of the issue? Can we begin to be, as people of the covenant, begin to function well in regard to what's going to happen? The mass migrations are going to happen. I don't necessarily always like it. I might be more tempted to be like it the way it was. We all are more comfortable the way things were. But things are going to change. And the question is, can we make sure that when the people who mass migrate, that they have something to live for besides being angry at the people that are there in the place that are not receiving them well? Anyway, those are the issues. We get sickness, we get pestilences, we get pandemics, we get mass redistributions of wealth, we get a realization that there's inequities and injustices in the world. Oh, people get stirred up about all sorts of things. Culture. My culture is so much better than your culture. My ethnicity is so much better than your ethnicity. My region of the country is so much better than your region of the country. My sports team is so much better than your sports team. I mean, we get all polarized over nonsense. Total abject and this becomes so important to us. My party is better than your party. Now, whenever we look at men, we look at humanity, we look at people, we don't take our eyes off, we do take our eyes off of the creator of the universe and his divine plan, his divine ways. That's what is indicative. A paradigm shift is ripe. We're ready to have one. A great rewrite is necessary, and it has to start. People always want it to start with the politicians. They always want it to start with the governments.
Right.
You're going to get the same old. What you need it needs to start with the people of the covenant. It needs to start with us and be birthed in us and be nurtured by us and begin to be revealed into the world by us. That is the essence of the paradigm shifting process. Nature if you understand the catalyst or the evidences, the signs that a paradigm shift is underway and a need for a paradigm shift is upon us, look around and you see these events. I hope what I've said awakens some hearts and eyes that says, wait a minute, maybe the old paradigm doesn't work anymore.
That's right.
Maybe this is part of our growing process and adjustment process to become more and more relevant as children of the living God.
So that leads me to my next question, because, the Holy One has a plan, right? That he knows his covenant family will not volunteer to sign up for, right? And so his ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not ours, and we have to be taught his ways. We have to be brought into his ways and experience his ways before we become familiar with them. But sometimes he does things that in our minds we don't really want to participate or wouldn't choose to participate, but he's going to implement this for the greater good, right? The ecosystem is in trouble, is at risk, and so he has to get involved. Thinking about him getting involved, and we're talking about the paradigm shift. It's necessary, it needs to be activated. The family of God is not moving forward for whatever reasons, and some of those are, as you mentioned. And then, he starts this activating of the paradigm shift, but he has tools that he uses to do this, right? And this is where I believe he knows we wouldn't, as you said, volunteer and sign up, right? Because of the tools.
Right.
What are some of these tools that the Holy One would use to start shifting our paradigm?
Well, I hope everybody probably knows a little bit about eagles and the mother eagle, and the eagle's nest is, the mother obviously sits on the eggs and the egg hatch, and there's these cute little birds with the mother mouths that are claiming for food. And they do that for the first week or the first 10 days or however period of time it is, and suddenly the mama looks at it and says, you guys need to be doing more than you're doing. You're sitting in the nest waiting for me to feed you, and that's not going to work out long term. And so what the mama eagle does is begin to pull feathers and stuff out of the nest to where the baby eagles are feeling, ooh, it's raw, that's uncomfortable. I'm feeling sticks, I'm getting poked. This is not comfortable for me. So it's the things that make the baby eagle uncomfortable. And eventually the mother eagle doesn't feed the babies as much. And so they begin to be hungry. And now it's like, why aren't you feeding me like you used to feed me? Why aren't I getting all the stuff I want? Why don't I get it the way I like it? Why isn't it good? This is the way you choose. This is like the mother eagle. The father says, okay, your nest is way too comfortable and you're way too dependent. And you're not becoming who you're supposed to be. You're not supposed to be little babies in the nest. You're supposed to be great eagles. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to have greatness about you, and you're supposed to be living at a higher plane and a higher level. And so the Holy One begins to take what's our comfort zone away from us. These are the primary tools of activating us for a paradigm shift. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's why no one would ever volunteer, He knows no one. It's going back to our parsha, the idea of what he wanted. He wanted Joseph. He wanted the eldest son of Rachel in Egypt as a forerunner and as a Messiah character, but as a forerunner for the emergence of the nation of Israel. Mm-hmm. No one is going to volunteer for the role that Joseph had to play. Okay, so we have, you want to be hated by your brothers and slandered by your brothers. You want to be beaten and stripped naked and thrown into a pit. No one would have said, I think I'll take that job if you don't mind. No one would have volunteered for that position. But Joseph had to go to Egypt, and he wasn't going voluntarily. And now these things happen to us, and we say, "Oh, well, our life, our comfortable little economy, our comfortable little nest egg, our comfortable little 401k, our comfortable little job situation, our comfortable little family situation is uncomfortable now. There's more things happening, and sometimes almost violent things have to happen to stir us to a paradigm shift, a reevaluation of the paradigm. And people have to arise. Pharaoh's Pharaoh, Potiphar's wife. Before Potiphar's wife, it was Potiphar. Before Potiphar, it was his brothers. Before you see the problem here. Sometimes the Holy One has to bring people into our lives that will keep pushing us forward and give us the chance of getting out of our comfort zone and becoming who we were created to be. Maintaining our shalom, maintaining our focus upon the redemptive plan. And that's really the scenario of the kind of things he will do. Anything to make you uncomfortable. Not because he hates you, because you're not active the way you need to be active. You're not fulfilling the purpose you're supposed to be fulfilling. You're not walking in a level of authority and a level of goodness and a level of peace and shalom and joy that you should be walking in. So rather than sit there and have a counseling session with you, which you would not listen to, he does what's necessary to bring it about in your life.
I love that, because each one of us, I'm sure, can agree, right, that in order for us to really be activated, and even in the sense of the paradigm shift and breaking patterns of stagnation, we all can agree that this has had to happen in our lives. And each one of us, and this is where we'll close, each one of us can affect our spheres of influence for the greater good. This is Joseph's story, but each one of us can do that. The cupbearer, right? He was just one person, but he was one person in a place with an encounter with Joseph that led to this process of Joseph being promoted. I want to encourage each of us, you can make a difference. God can use you as an individual to affect your sphere of influence. And even if you're just affecting your block, your neighborhood, your family, it's important that you be made uncomfortable to the degree that you're activated. I'll leave with this story. I have a route that I take home a lot, or that I take to my wife's job when I'm picking her up. And this route requires me to drive through an area called Pleasant Grove. And in Pleasant Grove, there's a street called Shillings. And years ago, when I used to drive through Shillings, like everybody else, not everybody, but like some others, I would speed, right? Because I'm trying to get to my wife's job, and I usually leave late. So I'm rushing to try to get to her so that she's not standing outside upset and irritated by the time she sees her car.
She wouldn't do that.
She wouldn't do anything like that. So I'm driving and I'm speeding, and so are other people. And there, in that community, children played in those streets. And there was a woman on Shillings that cared about that because she had grandchildren that played in those streets. And she became so uncomfortable and anxious over how fast the cars were moving that she decided to do something about it. Now they had a little sign out there, and sometimes they'd even put like one of the street signs that light up and flash and say slow down, but we didn't
always
follow
pay attention,
that, right? And so she decided, and sometimes there'd be like a police car would be like stationed somewhere up the hill where you couldn't see him, and then you cross the hill and there he is.
Hello.
That didn't work either because we would know when the police car wasn't there, and then we said go back to speed. So she decided to take matters in her own hand. She created her own little sign, and she would, when we were coming up the hill, she would be out there with her sign, and her sign would say something like, "Kids play here, slow down. Grandkids live here, slow down." Just stuff like that. And we kept seeing that sign. She kept popping out there, until you could tell everybody became familiar with her standing on that street corner with that sign, and you would start seeing people pump their brakes, right? To now, most of us, when we go through there now, we are so familiar with the lady who lived on the block, who held up the sign, who slowed everybody down, that now we slow down on our own. One lady on Schilling Street, regardless of what the street signs, police officers, and all those people failed to do, she decided, because I have skin in the game,
right,
I will do something. Being made uncomfortable is not a bad thing. In fact, it's what activates us to do something about what we're seeing. This doesn't mean that you need to go out with a sign and protest and do all these type of things and march on Capitol Hill. I'm not asking you to do any of those things. But what I'm saying is, based on this story, based on this portion, this narrative, trust that when God makes you uncomfortable, He's activating a paradigm shift in your life that will cause you to realign with the service model and be the counterbalance to the things that we're seeing in our world. Until next time, Shabbat Shalom. This is Tony and Bill, and this is Torah Talks.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right.